When it comes to road trips that tick off bucket list items, this one is a ripper. We set out from Adelaide and followed the Stuart Highway right through the middle of the country all the way to Darwin. Straight up the guts. And why is it called the Stuart Highway? Good question, I'm glad you asked. To explain that, let's start on January 21, 1863, when around 40,000 people turned out for Melbourne's first state funeral. They'd gathered to honour the country's newest heroes, Robert O'Hara Burke and William John Wills, the first Europeans to traverse the continent of Australia from south to north. And what more a romantic ending to such a marvellous adventure than that those heroes tragically meeting their end during the endeavour. 7 men perished on that disastrous expedition, along with dozens of horses and camels. Meanwhile, on the exact same day as that funeral procession, 750 kilometres away, on the dusty streets of the fledgling capital of South Australia, a much smaller crowd cheered on their own team of returning expeditioners. Led by a wiry and crotchety old Scotsman by the name of John McDowell Stuart, they had just achieved the same goal as their Victorian counterparts, but had returned to tell the tale. As it turned out, Burke and Wills hadn't actually reached the northern coast anyway. They'd been turned back near the mouth of the Flinders River, probably as close as only 12 kilometres from the coast, at the Gulf of Carpentaria. As their boots became stuck in the oozing mud of a vast mangrove swamp, they could taste salt in the water and were positive they could hear the sound of breaking waves in the distance. It was February 9, 1861, when they finally gave up and turned around in what turned out to be a futile attempt to return home. Stuart, on the other hand, had taken his well-worn boots off and wiggled his toes in a warm Timor Sea at Van Diemen Gulf, a little to the east of present-day Darwin, when he arrived there 18 months after the Victorian expedition had been turned back. But where Burke and Wills may have stolen the limelight in Australia's history, it was Stuart who actually showed the way through the centre of the continent and finally put an end to the theory of an inland sea. His expedition marked a huge turning point in Australian history. Only a couple of years after his return, a telegraph line was laid down along the path he'd mapped, which finally provided a much-needed connection to the rest of the world. Now a message could be sent from Melbourne to London in a matter of hours, rather than the months it had previously taken via sailing ship. A railway line would eventually link Darwin to Adelaide along Stuart's track, and the ancient people who had prospered in the arid centre of the continent for tens of thousands of years would have their way of life permanently dismantled. Stuart's mode of operation was to move from watering hole to watering hole. He travelled with 10 men and over 70 horses, so they needed lots of water. And within days of his return, his bosses in Adelaide quickly lodged claims to the land around those springs and billabongs, and moved their cattle in as quickly as they could to strengthen their claim upon the land. The local people who had relied on those water sources were suddenly dispossessed and often driven off by blade and gun. Aboriginal clan groups were routinely massacred to clear the way for cattle. Central Australia, which had remained virtually unchanged for more than 60,000 years, was forcefully dragged into a European world. So that's the history of the highway. Now let's get to our trip. We started out at the quaint little Germanic town of Harndorf in the Adelaide Hills. Then we took our first steps into the outback when we stayed at Hawker, gateway to the Flinders Ranges. From there we travelled to Woomera on the way to Coober Pedy, where we stayed in an underground motel for a few nights. Next stops were at Uluru, Alice Springs, and on up to Katherine to explore the famous Katherine Gorge. We spent the best part of a week in Kakadu and even visited Arnhem Land before staying over at Litchfield National Park and then on to Darwin. To finish off, we took a quick trip to the Tiwi Islands to soak up a little more Indigenous culture before heading home to a southern winter. So that's a rough outline. Now let's get into our trip. Unlike most other Australian cities that were established from a need to dump an ever-increasing supply of convicts, Adelaide was originally settled by liberal-minded Germanic Lutherans with a vision of creating a utopian paradise in the Antipodes. These days, thanks to that heritage, what remains is the beautiful little village of Harndorf, which seems to exist solely to drain the pockets of besotted tourists. German beer, German food. What's not to like? The Barossa Valley is just like the Hunter Valley, only different. It's definitely bigger, more spread out.
Look at that, eh?
Shane got pretty excited when we stopped in to visit Maggie Beer's farm.
And this is the so-called Pink Lake. I think we better wait for the sun to come out.
The outback town of Hawker has a population of about 340. It lies at the southern end of the magnificent Flinders Ranges, so we opted to stay at a cottage a couple of k's out of town. We booked a guide, Chris, who took us on a four-wheel drive tour where we stopped off at various gorges, lookouts and dry riverbeds to learn about the geology and meet some of the locals, like these extremely rare yellow-footed rock wallabies. I couldn't quite get a good picture with my little camera, so here's some footage I pinched off YouTube. We ended up at the Prairie Hotel in Parachilna for lunch. What a good choice. I partook of the four main food groups: emu, camel, kangaroo and goat. Delicious. Here's a great example of the iconic Black Boy Australian grass tree. This one is estimated to be around 200 to 300 years old. These are paddy melon. They're actually all over the place on the side of the road. Apparently nothing eats them except corellas. This place is called the Great Wall of China. Don't know why. Anyhow, it looked like a great place to send the drone up to capture some ancient rock eye candy. Everything was going well until, wow, that looked like a wedge-tailed eagle. Where'd he go? There he is. Oh yeah, that's a wedgie all right. He's coming back. it's okay. The wedge-tailed eagle must have decided my Mavic didn't look tasty enough, but it was a close call.
£14 a pound. Ready? Available. I got it. Roll up. Good. Sit back. Pull into the all the way out. Now see the gap? You can just see that gap in the middle there. That's that gap there. So Shani, that there is the Port Augusta Harbour, right? So that sort of hooks up to the Southern Ocean. So that's the last ocean we're going to see until we hit the Indian Ocean in Darwin. Pretty cool, eh? From here on in, it's just all road. Oh wait. Trust somebody to ruin our video. But there we go. That's the last ocean you see from that way. Like if you went all the way down there, you go back to Adelaide where we were a week ago. So it's been a week and we've only gone a couple of 100 miles. But from here on in, 3,000-4,000 kilometres, we'll be in Darwin in about 3 weeks' time. So bye ocean. This is the rail track from Port Augusta, well actually from Adelaide, all the way through to Darwin. This is the Garn railway line. Believe it or not, the full track between Adelaide and Darwin only opened in 2004 when the first passenger train went up there. Before then, there was other trains, as we know. The old Garn used to go through Hawker, but only not far past there. In 1883, another rail line ran 235 kilometres south from Darwin to Pine Creek, linking cattle stations, buffalo camps, peanut farms and gold mines, but not much else. It was dubbed the Never Never Line, never on time and never going anywhere. Woomera Missile Park. Ready, set, fire! Apart from some childish photos, there wasn't much else to get excited about at Woomera. The town was set up as a military operation after World War II, still is to a smaller extent, and that functional lack of adornment permeates still. What I found really amazing is that 122,000 square kilometres of Central Australia is set aside as a prohibited zone for testing defence material. This area was much larger, around 270,000 square kilometres back in the 1950s when the British were testing nuclear weapons here and at Maralinga.
This salt lake is called Island Lagoon. It's only one of many salt lakes in South Australia. In fact, prior to the 1860s, it was thought that Adelaide was surrounded to the north by one huge horseshoe lake. It was John McDowell Stewart who debunked that myth and named many separate entities during his travels. Coober Pedy really is a Wild West kind of town. It seems like there was never any planning involved in its development. There's a hill in the middle of town that is riddled with tunnels, like a giant termite mound. And the surrounding countryside, for nearly 3,000 square kilometres, is pocked with man-made shafts that, from the air, resembles a huge ant's nest. Well-paying opal seams are still being discovered all the time. Some get rich, most don't. Sturbs Desert P. We spent a couple of nights in an underground motel, which provided a tick on Shane's bucket list. Important world events took place while we were here. King Charles was inaugurated, and the Knights won a game. Talking of bucket list ticks, our new mate, Matt, picked us up shortly after dawn in a 1970 model Cessna for a trip out to Lake Eyre. Along the way, we landed on a piece of cleared dirt for a walking tour of the Anna Creek Painted Hills. It was a chilly 2 degrees with a wind chill of -5.
Another eucalyptus tree here.
Evidence of the Paleozoic Ice Age, which had engulfed Gondwanaland about 300 million years ago, was laid out all over once we knew what we were looking for. It's fascinating if you're a geek for this stuff like I am. Back in the plane, we were briefly reminded of the age of our aircraft. Matt said, "Looks like we might need to make an unscheduled maintenance landing," as he scanned the ground for somewhere suitable to put us down. Pumped the choke a few times, and not long after the engine settled down. "Ice in the carburettor," he said nonchalantly. Lake Eyre was as magnificent as I'd expected. A white sheet of salt stretched out as far as we could see from our vantage point 500 feet above the ground. Matt showed us a blowhole where hot artesian water had bubbled to the surface and stained the pristine white with red mud. Next stop was the famous William Creek Hotel on the Oodnadatta track. Comfy?
I am just having a cup of tea.
It's been a wonderful day, hasn't it?
It certainly has.
What an awesome place this is. Matt warmed the engine for 10 minutes prior to takeoff this time. Back on terra firma, we have one last place to visit during this stopover. Kanku Breakaways Conservation Area is a short drive down the road. Flat-top mesas and multicoloured cliffs and bluffs adorn this area that would not look out of place in a John Wayne Western. Pretty spectacular, isn't it? The road back to town also passes along the 2-metre high wire dog fence, which stretches for over 5,300 kilometres across 3 states. It's here to protect the sheep country to the south from dingoes, and is another example of how Europeans have tried to bring nature to heel. Shane had one last go at digging for opal in our hotel wall, so we thought it was time to leave town.
Welcome to the Northern Territory.
Not long after we crossed into the Northern Territory, we came upon the jaw-dropping sight of Uluru in the distance.
What are you looking at, Shani? Something over there? Oh my God.
11.5, isn't it?
Would you look at that?
This place is just as awesome close up as it seemed to me when I looked at pictures as a kid. At sunset we marvelled that all the stories of changing colours and majesty were all true. In the morning we watched the sun rise from the other side of the monolith. And shared our breakfast with some friendly butcher birds. Our guide, Ellie, took us into a dark recess that is Midjulu Waterhole, an Aboriginal sacred place. The site is guarded by spiritual beings painted under overhangs near the entrance to the gully. Then we were off on an 11-kilometre circumnavigation of the rock via Segway. Next day we drove the 50 plus kilometres to Cartajuda for some strenuous hiking among the gorges.
What did you think of that, Shani?
It was tough
It was.
on the rocks,
Yeah.
but it was pretty tough down through the gorge.
And now we've just got back, puffing and panting, and the flies are wanting to fly down our throat. So let's get out of here.
We are one, but we are many, and from all the lands on earth we come. We share a dream and sing with one voice. I am, you are, we are Australian. We are one, but we are many, and from all the lands on earth we come. We share a dream and sing with one voice. I am, you are, we are Australian.
Onward, Victor.
I'm with Macduff.
Alice Springs was certainly an uncomfortable place to be. The streets and malls were eerily empty, apart from groups of surly-looking Aboriginals who obviously still carry a huge chip on their collective shoulders. We had 2 nights here, and the walk home from the pub was quickly stepped out, with lots of glances over our shoulders. It was that kind of uneasy place. The young receptionist at our hotel told us of how she'd been assaulted only a week before. After she'd finished work at her other job at Woolworths, in the early evening, a group of Indigenous girls and women approached her and demanded her car keys. She had her hair pulled when she refused, before making a quick getaway.
Holy cow.
Worst thing about places like this is there's other tourists here. In the middle of the desert. A taxi driver told us his car was an easy target for kids throwing stones. Apparently that's a daily occurrence. But the area around the Alice abounds in some truly spectacular natural wonders.
It's the big day. But before the visitors arrive for their tour, there's one last job to do. Brolga must round up and lock down mob boss Roger.
Roger and visitors don't mix. Roger will attack any man he sees. So basically I've got to trap him in the enclosure, and the best way to lure him back is to get bait. And the best bait to get Roger back to his enclosure is me. Not far away from getting Roger back home. I'm exhausted. Come on, mate. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Here we are, here we are.
With Roger safely locked away, it's time for the tour.
Gorgeous.
They're going, is it really time to get up?
Yeah.
He still looks sleepy.
He's still very sleepy.
Yes.
These babies are here. They're actually here for you to hold.
Say hello, this is Louie.
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 Hello, this is Abigail, and she's one of my original three. So she grew up in a basket cuddled up with Roger. And there's Roger, Ella, and Abigail. And she's beautiful. She loves a cuddle. Yeah.
So beautiful. No, and I just thought,
Because for the red kangaroo, this is actually his most favourite tree to sleep under because it provides the best shadow.
Glad to be away from Alice Springs, we soon found a similar scenario at Tennant Creek. The main street was almost totally empty. Shops were closed, and some were boarded up. Then we heard that the races were on. There's it, Adonis. Damn, another donation to the bookies. After takeaway Chinese, we had a couple of nightcaps in the securely gated car park of our motel and looked forward to moving on early in the morning for the long drive to Katherine. What a great place. If we ever come back, I'll definitely be stopping here for at least one night. We were well and truly into the tropics now, and our jackets and gloves had been relegated to the bottom of the suitcase. Thermal springs are found all over this part of the country, where hot water bubbles up from the massive artesian basin that lies deep underground. Swimming holes at Mataranka and Katherine are some of the more famous. Wacky tack.
Oh, God.
You don't have to call me guide all the time. The streets were a lot more vibrant here in Katherine. Shane went to buy a new shirt and was surprised by my reaction to her choice. Lots of flying foxes. Probably shouldn't walk under the tree. It's very hot, so they're flapping their wings to keep cool.
Hold him there at the top, in the palm of the hand like this, or tight like that, and rock on fast like this.
And you, mate, Manuel, kept us entertained while he tried to explain his culture. I'm getting hungry, Shane. You got the fire going yet?
Too cold, too cold.
Then you've got to go and get the kangaroo first.
Kangaroos in the fridge.
Okay, good. Oh, no, too late.
You got the ember. Perfect.
Okay, now, gotta put it
You're not
in.
done yet.
Who wanna blow this?
Do you go around and stop?
Yes. Oh, this one will be okay now. You blow from the top, but gentle first. Stop. One more. Stop.
He's an amazing bloke, seeing as he didn't see his first white fella until he was a teenager.
Now here says Rambarana. That's my mom language. Rambarana. My dad, Talabon, my dad, Rambarana. Now, can you start again? On video, how you do that walk up. Right. Ready? Ready, go.
Oh!
Lift them up. Hang on. Okay. Arm back. Arm back. A little more further. Go.
Look here first.
Okay, yep. Now that's good. More harder. Yes, get it, mate. But I didn't say hard.
Whoa! First night in Catherine's, ain't it?
Certainly is, and I'm enjoying a mango daiquiri on outside dining around the pool with the pretty lights and by torchlight, really, candlelight.
Well, it's going to be reasonably flat, although we do pass through an old Jarman camping ground later on.
Catherine Gorge, or Nipmaluk, is one of those places that has been on my bucket list since I was a kid, and it didn't disappoint.
Crocodile track in front of us there. As you'll notice, it's closed, but there's a little freshwater crop in there, so we won't get too close to the track.
Right after the wet season is the best time for hazard reduction burning. These days this is managed by Indigenous rangers. We made our Kakadu base at Jabiru, a town built back in the 80s by the company that owned the Ranger uranium mine. We arrived only a month or two after the wet season, where most of Kakadu had been underwater. Oh my God, what you could see.
Oh, far and wide, Jim, far and wide.
Far and wide.
Kakadu.
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 In all its splendour.
Kakadu. Beautiful.
Some of the best rock art sites in the world can be found at Kakadu and Arnhem Land, where layer upon layer of artwork is under almost every overhang.
Kangaroos.
Look at this bloke, he's scary.
No, that's a woman.
She's scary. When Europeans talk about ancient, as in Rome or Egypt, those places don't even come close in age to these art galleries. Some of this stuff is estimated to be between 8 and 10,000 years old. .8 kilometre return. No, we'll just get some pictures, that'll do. Any crocodiles?
Oh, I'm hoping not. How fast I can run, so you can't.
I can run. It's not very quick.
On one leg. So I thought it was like a woman with one of of those.
Oh, it is. Look, there's a spear and a woomera above the head. Oh, these are more recent. That's why they stand out. How recent are they?
Maybe during the last 1,000 years.
Only 1,000 years old. Or less than 1,000 years old. Can't get much clearer than that. There's more paintings around the side that you're not allowed to photograph. Need to sit down after that, don't we?
Yep. It's very hot.
Made it up here to the lookout. We were just looking at the rock art at the bottom of that cliff face over there. This is an example of what the rock's like up here. It's a conglomerate sandstone. This is our accommodation here at Jabiru in Kakadu National Park. It's just a small cabin. 1 bedroom. As a matter of fact, 1 room. Have a look at this. There you go. Hello, Shani.
Hello, Jimbo.
Just showing everybody the spacious accommodations we have here.
Oh, wait till you see the bathroom.
So this is it. Just basically 1 room with a metre wide ensuite. So how much do you reckon pay for that? $100 a night? 150 maybe?
I don't know. I don't even know if it'd be worth that, would it?
Would you reckon, what do you reckon, $325 a night? Because it's in Kakadu National Park. Jabiru is about the only place you can stop, and you can charge whatever you want. And you know what? It's worth it because we love Jabiru. It's a great spot. Well, we love Kakadu. Jabiru's a bit ordinary.
So, just a reminder, ask questions today, fellas. Don't be shy. If they can't answer it because it's culturally inappropriate, they're not going to get offended. They're just going to tell you, no, I can't answer that. If you don't ask, you'll never know.
Sometimes you can see
Keep an eye out. Really, the crocodiles aren't a thing here. Next one. Yeah, another crocodile gathering here.
Yeah, I'm good. This is What's your name? Jim. I'm Billy.
We were on our way to Arnhem Land when our guide recognised a few blokes who were walking alongside the road, so we pulled over to give them a lift. Turns out their car had broken down a few kilometres back, and they were walking to the same place we were headed, 60 kilometres away. That's Injalak Hill over there, and our guides were about to lead us up to the summit, along invisible tracks and through cracks and crevices in the rock. But first we were shown how the women do their weaving and other handiwork.
Oh, that's what they do.
They put this in a building and boil it up to
Make the different colours.
These women and our guides, Sebastian and Sproten, are all related.
Is that a pig?
It's echidna.
Oh, an echidna.
Echidna.
I was going to say, they haven't had spurs in it.
Porcupine.
So clear.
They caught it and cooked it here, and same time they've been painted on the rock.
Injalak is sacred to the local Gamwingu people and is a treasure trove of paintings, carvings and burial sites that remain as untouched as ever due to isolation, but also the fact that nobody can visit without being escorted by a local.
I mean, you can hear all the magpie geese.
All the magpies?
Yeah, magpies up there. Like now we have they're nesting and make a baby ones. Yeah, like now when they got babies.
Hear my voice blowing on the breeze. Know your face, know your history. As I am now, you one day will be. Face your past, then face your destiny.
Cooinda is about the only other place tourists can stay at in Kakadu. Our caravan park was beside the Jim Jim River, so I guess it was inevitable that we'd make our way here. Seeing as it was only a half-hour drive down the road from Jabiru, we spent the rest of the day exploring nearby.
That's a pretty picture.
Hey, toro.
Donkey, donkey.
Hey, toro.
Yimiknik Falls. Don't laugh, it is called Yimiknik.
Look at this. We're in the dry season. This is drying up. It's slowly drying up. And Billabong is technically still water, so this is still just a creek while the water runs in behind us, but in a very short period of time it'll stop flowing. To give you some sort of idea of how much water we can get, that dock on our right hand side has been known to float off the top of those poles and disappear downstream. Those poles go underwater. They found it 3 k's downstream one day. It's a whole lot of water, hey? Another little crocodile on the right hand side. That's 4 crocodiles. We'll watch the sunrise, I'll take you back. That's the limit, sorry folks. 2 are over. And that is the best time to hunt them, when they're full of that food. That's when they're at their fattest, and that's when they look the problem was you can turn a crocodile into a $30,000 handbag. You can turn 3 crocodiles into a $100,000 handbag, and that's a pretty big motivation for people to come out and do support them. So, although that protection came into play, there wasn't a lot of people to enforce it back in the day out here remotely. So they continued shooting them, like poaching sort of continued. So they very quickly realised the only way they were going to work this out was if they could provide those skins to the people who wanted them legally, because it's so much money, you know, it's always going to happen. See how clean the water is here, folks, in the floodplains rather than the river? They call this the filter of Kakadu, you know, these.
Crocodile heaven, this river. Oh yeah, crocodile marks right there.
gone down the river. I thought it was a stick, but look at its back.
Yeah, that's a crocodile. Having a ride. Yeah, that's a crocodile. We disturbed a mob of black-breasted buzzards who had been feasting on the road. The Adelaide River Hotel was home to Charlie, the water buffalo who starred in the first Crocodile Dundee movie, where he often frequented the bar and was also sometimes found drunk after being shouted too many beers by tourists. Litchfield National Park, home of cascading waterfalls and magnetic termite mounds. That's a big one you got there, Shaney.
I know, look at it, it's rock solid.
Right.
It's a cathedral.
That's a cathedral termite mound. Any others around?
Up that way.
Is there? And what sort of pandanus palms are they?
Pandanus.
Yeah, pandanus Jim Jim.
Oh, Jim Jim.
That's why it's called Jim Jim Road. Jim Jim Falls, Jim Jim Creek, Jim Jim Bullybong. It's not named after me twice. Oh, look at that, there's two more. But there's hundreds, they're all over the place, aren't they? So we've arrived at our new digs, this time in Batchelor, just beside Litchfield National Park. You look at that, it's just a cabin on stilts, pretty much what we had last night. Remember I said how expensive it was? So tonight we went a bit different. This is where we are tonight. A little bit upmarket. We've only got a few days to go. So we thought, why not finish off in style? 2 bedrooms. Here's Mrs. Kafoops studying the map, working out where we can go tomorrow. Step out here. Okay. Outside shower. Communing with nature. We saw lots of predatory birds on this trip. Apart from roadkill, the Northern Territory was in the middle of its post-wet season burning, where hazard reduction fires offered up partially singed tasty treats for hungry kites, buzzards and eagles.
Well, I suppose it's all the grasshoppers probably coming out of the bush.
Size of that termite mound, it's got to be 20 foot high, if not more. Holy cacciatori.
Colour of the water being
Where did you go? Where did you come from? Cotton Eye Joe. Did I live Cotton Eye Joe? I've been married a long time ago. Where did you come from? Where did you go? Where did you come from? Cotton Eye Joe. Go! Yeah, grab your partner, do-si-do. Yee-hoo! All right, we're going to need to stay in that circle, guys.
Here's our digs for the next 3 days. You reckon we'll survive, Tony?
I think so, yes.
This is it for our last stop. Well, actually it's not our last stop. There might be a surprise just around the corner. It's a nice town, isn't it, Shani?
It is actually, yes, very.
It's a big harbour. Can barely see across the other side. The Japanese bombed this place about 50 times during World War II, and during that time my Uncle Ron was serving here as an 18-year-old in the Navy. Mindle Beach, ain't
It is.
Mindle Beach.
Pristine.
You would think it'd be as far north as you could get, wouldn't you? But it's not. We're going to go even further north. We're going out there to the Tiwi Islands on Friday. Going to Bathurst Island. There are some definite differences between the Tiwi people and their mainland counterparts, due mainly to distance. Nearly 90 kilometres is a long way to paddle a dugout canoe. The Tiwis have no boomerang. Their favourite joke seems to be that to them, a boomerang is just a stick. They have no didgeridoo. For music, they rely on clapping sticks and human voice. They're a friendly mob and are happy to show us around. This is the old church that featured in the movie Top End Wedding. Back in Darwin, we watched the sunset with hundreds of others on Mindle Beach. It seemed a fitting end to this epic road trip we've been on, along a road named after a wiry old Scotsman who changed Australia forever. Apparently, watching the sunset on this beach is a must-do thing up here. The bush smoke on the horizon certainly added to a colourful spectacle. I did laugh out loud at the modern-day hippies who clapped and cheered as the sun dipped below the horizon. What? Were they expecting it to bounce back briefly for an encore performance? It got me to thinking. Are we so different from those people who were forcefully dragged out of the Stone Age 160 years ago? I'm sure those old Aboriginal ancestors would have appreciated many a pleasant evening on Injalac Hill, admiring the sun as it dipped below the horizon during the burning season.